Because he was trying to understand how many people had been manipulated. According to him, the older man had been financially supporting my wife. Not entirely. But enough to matter. Gifts. Trips. Expenses. Rent payments connected to that apartment Rachel found. The apartment wasn't just a meeting place. It was essentially a secret second life. I remember sitting there completely stunned. Every answer created 3 new questions. Then Daniel handed me a folder. An actual physical folder. Inside were screenshots. Bank transfers. Photos. Copies of messages. Dates. Records. The amount of documentation was insane. Who keeps records like this? Apparently someone who spends months watching families implode. As I flipped through the pages, one particular screenshot caught my attention. It showed a conversation between my wife and the older man. A conversation discussing money. Specifically money she needed. Large amounts. Urgently. The older man asked why. Her answer chilled me. She claimed she needed funds in case her marriage ended unexpectedly. She was literally creating a financial escape plan. While still living in my house. Sleeping in my bed. Looking me in the eyes every day. The deeper I read, the more disturbing things became. Because according to the messages, she wasn't planning for a divorce. She was planning for multiple outcomes simultaneously. If my friend left his wife, she'd pursue that relationship. If the older man left his wife, she'd pursue that relationship. If neither worked out, she'd stay married to me. I wasn't a husband. I was Plan C. A backup generator. A fallback option. A safety net. And somehow that realization hurt more than the affairs themselves. Nobody wants to discover they're someone's second choice. Or third choice. Or emergency option. Then Daniel said something that made my stomach drop. There might be more. More. Of course there was more. At that point, why not? Apparently during his own investigation, he'd encountered references to another person. Someone younger. Someone local. Someone who didn't fit into any of the timelines we'd already uncovered. I remember rubbing my face and laughing. Actually laughing. Not because it was funny. Because I had reached a point where my brain simply couldn't absorb any additional betrayal. One affair had become 2. 2 became 3. 3 might become 4. Reality had stopped making sense. Before leaving, Daniel gave me one final piece of advice. Whatever you think you know, assume there's more. At the time, I thought he was exaggerating. I thought there couldn't possibly be anything left to discover. I was wrong. Very wrong. Because that evening, after months of lies, secrets, manipulation, and betrayal, my wife finally realized that I knew something. Not everything. But enough. And the moment she realized that, the most explosive confrontation of our entire marriage began. It didn't happen all at once. At first, it was subtle. My wife came home earlier than usual. She was watching me. Not openly. But I noticed it. The way she paused when I picked up my phone. The way she asked questions that felt slightly too pointed. The way she started checking in on me more often during the day. She knew something had changed. She just didn't know how much. I played it calm. Too calm, maybe. Because I didn't want her to realize I already had enough evidence to destroy everything. Not yet. That night, she tried something new. She suggested dinner. Not just dinner. A serious talk over dinner. Her tone was careful. Almost rehearsed. Like she was trying to regain control of a situation she could feel slipping. We sat across from each other at the table. She smiled too much. Laughed too easily. Then she said it. I feel like we've been a little distant lately. I nearly laughed out loud. Distant. That word felt almost insulting given everything I now knew. Instead, I just nodded. Maybe, I said. She leaned forward slightly. I think we should focus on us again. Us. That word hit differently now. Because I knew us had included at least 3 other men in her version of reality. Still, I stayed quiet. Let her talk. She started suggesting things. Weekend trips. Date nights. Therapy. Rebuilding trust. All the standard scripts people use when they're trying to repair something. Except she wasn't repairing anything. She was managing damage. There's a difference. And I could feel it. Then she said something that finally confirmed what I suspected. I just don't want us to fall apart because of misunderstandings. Misunderstandings. That word again. Not lies. Not betrayal. Not deception. Misunderstandings. I remember looking at her for a long moment. Really looking. Trying to understand how someone could sit across from me after everything and still try to reframe reality like that. Before I could respond, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it. Too quickly. Then flipped it face down. But I saw enough. A name. Not saved as a contact. Just initials. Different from anything I'd seen before. Something new. Another thread. Another possibility. At that moment, something inside me shifted. I stopped feeling confused. Stopped feeling desperate for answers. I started feeling certain. She wasn't going to stop. Even now. Even after everything that was already collapsing around her. She was still maintaining multiple narratives at once. Multiple people. Multiple lies. Multiple versions of her life. And I realized something terrifying. This wasn't chaos. This was her system. That night, after she fell asleep, I sat in the living room with all the evidence spread out in front of me. Rachel's screenshots. Emma's flash drive. Daniel's folder. My notes. Bank records. Hotel charges. Messages. It didn't feel like pieces of a story anymore. It felt like a map. And every line pointed in the same direction. She hadn't been caught in an affair. She had built an entire parallel life structure. Layered. Deliberate. Expanding. Like it had no intention of ever stopping. Around 2 a.m., I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait anymore. Not for more proof. Not for more confirmation. Not for her to escalate further. Because now I understood something crucial. If I didn't act, she would keep going until everything around me was burned to the ground. The next morning, I contacted a lawyer. And within 48 hours, I did something I never thought I would do in my life. I prepared to confront her with everything. All at once. No warnings. No partial truths. No room for denial. What she didn't know was that I also had one final piece of evidence coming in. Something that would turn the confrontation from a painful divorce discussion into something far more devastating than either of us was prepared for. The lawyer told me something I didn't expect. Not legal advice. Not strategy. Just a warning. Don't do this alone. At first I didn't understand what he meant. Then he explained. Cases like this, where deception, finances, and multiple relationships overlap, tend to explode unpredictably when confronted directly. People lie more. They escalate. They panic. They rewrite stories in real time. And sometimes they become desperate. That last word stuck with me. Desperate. Still, I had already made up my mind. Waiting longer wasn't an option anymore. Because every day I delayed felt like giving her more time to build another layer of lies on top of the existing ones. The final piece of evidence arrived the next morning. From Daniel. Just one message. Check your email. Attached was a file I hadn't seen before. A recording. Audio. At first I hesitated. Then I pressed play. Her voice came through instantly. Clear. Confident. Familiar. And completely unrecognizable in what she was saying. She wasn't talking to me. She was talking about me. To someone else. The older married man. She was laughing at first. Then describing our marriage. Mocking it. Reducing years of shared life into something almost casual. But the part that broke something inside me came later. She said, and I remember this word for word. He'll believe anything I tell him. He always has. A pause. Then laughter. Not nervous laughter. Not uncertain laughter. Genuine amusement. Like it was a joke she'd been telling for a long time. Then she added something worse. When this is over, he'll still defend me for a while. He doesn't even realize how easy it is. I stopped the recording. I couldn't continue. Not because I was surprised. But because hearing it in her voice made it real in a way nothing else had. Messages can be denied. Screenshots can be questioned. But hearing her say it. There was no interpretation left. That night, I didn't sleep. I just sat there replaying those words in my head. He always has. It reframed everything. Every argument I had apologized for. Every time I doubted myself. Every moment I thought I was overreacting. It wasn't confusion. It was manipulation. Deliberate. Consistent. Long-term. The next day, I met with the lawyer again. This time, I brought everything. And I mean everything. He went through it quietly. No interruptions. No reactions. Just silence and scrolling. When he finished, he closed the folder and leaned back in his chair. Then he said something I didn't expect. This is not just a divorce case. My stomach tightened. He continued. This is potentially a fraud case. And possibly more. That word again. Fraud. It kept appearing. Like a shadow following every part of her life I uncovered. The lawyer advised immediate separation. Formal communication only. No private discussions. No emotional confrontation. Everything documented. Everything structured. But I knew I wouldn't be able to avoid confrontation entirely. Because I had already scheduled it. That evening. She thought it was going to be another serious talk. Another attempt to fix things. Another controlled conversation where she could steer the narrative. She had no idea what was waiting. I arrived home earlier than usual. Set everything on the dining table. Printed messages. Bank records. Screenshots. Summaries. Chronological timelines. Even the audio transcription. When she walked in and saw it, she stopped immediately. Just froze. For the first time since I'd known her, she didn't have a response ready. No smile. No deflection. No anger. Just silence. And then she looked at me and said one sentence. What is this? I didn't answer right away. I just looked back at her. Because in that moment, I realized something important. This wasn't just about catching someone cheating anymore. This was about dismantling a reality she had built piece by piece over years. And I was about to open the door on all of it at once. What she did next would determine whether this ended in denial. Or complete collapse. She stood there for a long time. Long enough that the silence started to feel heavier than any argument we'd ever had. Then she walked slowly to the table. Not rushing. Not reacting. Carefully. Like she was approaching something dangerous. Her eyes scanned the documents. One by one. Messages. Dates. Screenshots. Bank records. The audio transcript printed out in black and white. I watched her face as she read. At first it was confusion. Then disbelief. Then something closer to panic. But she still tried. Even then. She picked up one of the pages and let out a short laugh. This is taken out of context. That was her first line. Not denial. Not explanation. Context. I didn't respond. She flipped another page. You're spying on me. Still no denial. Just deflection. Then she saw the financial documents. The credit card statements. The loan application. That was the first time her composure cracked. Where did you get this? Her voice changed slightly. Tighter now. Less controlled. I finally spoke. It doesn't matter. That was the moment something shifted. Her posture straightened. Her expression hardened. Like she'd switched strategies. Okay, she said slowly. So you've been digging through my life behind my back. I nodded. I needed the truth. She scoffed. The truth? Then she gestured at the table. This is not truth. This is you obsessing over nothing and twisting it into something bigger. Nothing. That word. All of this. Nothing. I felt something cold settle in my chest. She continued. You've clearly been talking to people. Filling your head with nonsense. Probably that coworker gossip. I cut her off. I spoke to Rachel. Silence. Just a flicker. Barely visible. But it was there. Then I added. And Emma. And Daniel. That was the first time she stopped talking completely. For a few seconds, she just stared at me. Then she exhaled slowly. Almost like she was disappointed. Oh, she said quietly. So this is what this is. I frowned. What is it? She leaned back slightly. And then she did something I didn't expect. She smiled. Not a warm smile. Not nervous. Something colder. Almost detached. You really believe all of them? That question hit differently. Because it wasn't denial. It was reframing. Again. Same pattern. Same technique. She continued. They've all had their own issues with their relationships. You think they're just innocent bystanders? I stayed quiet. She nodded slowly, as if convincing herself. This is what happens when people project their problems onto others. I felt my patience snap slightly. So the hotel charges are projections? Her expression didn't change. So what if I made mistakes, she said suddenly. Not admitting. Not apologizing. Just shifting tone. I'm not perfect. Neither are you. There it was. The pivot. The familiar move. Equalizing. Dragging everything into shared blame. I looked at her carefully. This isn't about mistakes. She laughed once. Short. Sharp. Then what is it about? I reached for the audio transcript. Placed it in front of her. About you saying I believe anything you tell me. For the first time, her expression froze completely. No movement. No sarcasm. Just stillness. I watched her carefully. Waiting. She looked down at the paper. Then at me. And in that moment, I saw something different. Not guilt. Not regret. Calculation. Like she was deciding something. The room felt smaller. Tighter. She finally spoke. That's not how it sounds. I nodded slowly. Then explain it. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached for her phone. That simple movement changed the atmosphere instantly. I noticed it. The shift. The instinct. Whatever she was about to do wasn't part of the conversation. It was something else entirely. And I suddenly realized this confrontation wasn't ending the way I expected. Not with confession. Not with denial. But with something far more unpredictable. Because she had just stopped trying to defend herself. And started trying to control what happened next. Her hand stayed on the phone. That was the moment everything shifted again. I didn't move at first. I just watched her. Because I suddenly understood what she was trying to do. This wasn't panic. It wasn't confusion. It was damage control. She unlocked her phone. And I reached across the table and took it out of her hand. Not violently. Not aggressively. Just decisively. For the first time, she looked surprised. "Give that back," she said immediately. I didn't. Instead, I placed it face down next to the documents. "No," I said quietly. "We're done doing things your way." That sentence changed her expression. The calm started to break. "You're seriously doing this right now?" she snapped. I nodded. "Yes." She stood up abruptly. "This is insane. You've been listening to people who don't know anything about our marriage." I interrupted her. "They know more about it than I did." That shut her down for half a second. Then she tried another approach. Anger. "You've been spying on me, going through my private things, turning everyone against me." I cut her off again. "I didn't turn anyone against you. You did that yourself." Silence. Heavy this time. She looked around the room like she was searching for an exit that wasn't there. Then she grabbed her keys. "I'm leaving." I nodded. "Okay." That surprised her. She hesitated. "You're just going to let me go?" I looked at her. "I'm not stopping you." Another pause. Then she said something quieter. "This is a mistake." I almost laughed. But I didn't. Because I wasn't confused anymore. For the first time in a long time, I was certain. She walked toward the door. Stopped. Turned back. And said, "You don't understand what you're doing." That line lingered. Because it sounded less like a threat. And more like a warning. Then she left. The door closed. And for a few seconds, there was nothing. No shouting. No manipulation. No noise. Just silence. I sat down at the table again. Looked at everything spread out in front of me. And finally did what I should have done a long time ago. I called my lawyer. Not to ask questions. Not to explore options. To execute a plan that had already been set in motion. He picked up immediately. When I told him what had just happened, he didn't sound surprised. "Good," he said simply. "Then we proceed." Within hours, things started moving. Accounts were flagged. Documentation was submitted. Formal separation paperwork was initiated. Evidence was preserved and organized. And for the first time in months, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was acting. 2 days later, I got another call. This time from Rachel. Her voice was different. Calmer. Resolved. "He left," she said. I understood immediately. Her husband. The affair partner. It was finally collapsing on her side too. We sat in silence for a moment. Then she said something I didn't expect. "I think this is over." Not just the affair. Everything. And she was right. Because over the next week, everything unraveled quickly. Too quickly for it to be accidental. My wife attempted to access accounts she no longer controlled. Denied. She tried to contact me repeatedly. Ignored. She showed up once at the house. My lawyer had already warned me what to do. I didn't open the door. Eventually, communication stopped. Completely. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful at first. It felt empty. Like walking through a house where something important used to be, but wasn't anymore. But slowly, that emptiness turned into clarity. Over the next months, the legal process revealed even more than I expected. Financial discrepancies were confirmed. Unauthorized credit activity was documented. Multiple overlapping relationships were verified through records and testimony. The story wasn't just betrayal. It was sustained deception on multiple levels. Emotionally. Socially. Financially. And while I won't go into the legal outcome in detail, I will say this. I was no longer responsible for what she had built. Only for what I chose to do next. One evening, months later, I found myself sitting alone in the same kitchen where everything had started falling apart. Same table. Same silence. But I wasn't the same person anymore. I thought about all the signs I missed. All the moments I ignored my instincts. All the times I explained away behavior I shouldn't have. And I realized something I probably should have understood earlier. Trust doesn't fail in one moment. It erodes slowly, through repeated lies you convince yourself are temporary. If there's anything I learned from all of this, it's this. If someone repeatedly makes you question your reality, eventually you stop trusting them, or yourself. And once that happens, nothing stays stable for long. For anyone going through something similar, I won't tell you what decision to make. But I will say this. Patterns matter more than promises. Consistency matters more than explanations. And your instincts matter more than someone else's version of your reality. Because in the end, the truth didn't come from confrontation. It came from evidence. And once I finally accepted that, everything else stopped being confusing. It just became clear. A few months after everything legally settled, I thought the story was finally done. It wasn't. Not in the dramatic sense. No more confrontations. No more hidden accounts. No more late-night revelations. But closure isn't always clean. Sometimes it comes in fragments. Like overhearing your own past spoken by someone else. I ran into Daniel again unexpectedly. Same guy who had shown up at my door earlier in the chaos. He didn't recognize me at first. Then he did. We talked briefly over coffee. Awkward at first. Then more natural. He told me things had stabilized on his side too. Not perfect. But stable. Then, almost casually, he mentioned something that made me pause. She tried to reach out again. I looked at him. Your ex. He nodded. Then added. Not to me. To him. It took me a second. Then I realized what he meant. My friend. The original affair partner. Apparently, even after everything collapsed, she had attempted to reconnect. Multiple times. Different accounts. Different numbers. Different messages. Same pattern. I didn't feel shocked anymore. Just distant. Like I was hearing about a character from a story I no longer belonged to. Then Daniel said something else. She still doesn't admit what it was. I frowned. What do you mean? He hesitated. Then said. She calls it complicated. That word again. Complicated. A word used to soften things that are actually very clear. We sat in silence for a moment. Then he asked me a question I didn't expect. Do you regret not confronting it sooner? I thought about it. Really thought about it. The early signs. The doubts. The lies I rationalized. The times I ignored my own instincts because I wanted peace more than truth. Finally, I answered honestly. I regret trusting explanations that didn't match reality. He nodded. Like he understood exactly what I meant. After that, life became quieter. Not perfect. Not suddenly happy. Just quieter. I moved out of the shared house. Started over in a smaller place. Rebuilt routines that didn't include constant suspicion. There were days I didn't think about it at all. And days where it came back unexpectedly. Usually in small moments. A phrase someone used. A notification sound. A familiar street. But over time, even those moments lost intensity. One evening, I was cleaning out old storage boxes and found something I didn't expect. A notebook. Mine. From the early years of the marriage. Before everything. Inside were old plans. Trips we wanted to take. Goals we wrote down together. At first, I almost closed it. But I kept reading. And I realized something uncomfortable. There had been a version of my life where everything was simple. Not perfect. But honest. That version didn't disappear because of one event. It disappeared because I stayed inside a version of reality that kept shifting without my consent. And I kept adjusting to it. That was the hardest part to accept. Not the betrayal itself. But how long I adapted to it before I finally stopped. If there's anything left to say, it's this. People don't usually wake up one day and become strangers. They become strangers slowly. Through patterns you excuse. Through explanations you accept. Through versions of reality you start borrowing from someone else. And by the time you notice the difference, you're already deep inside it. I don't tell this story because I think it's rare. I tell it because it isn't. And because the most dangerous lies aren't always the obvious ones. Sometimes they're the ones that sound reasonable enough to believe. Even when